Excited shouts bounce around the forest. They've found tracks. The searchers stare in disbelief at the imprint of a child's tiny foot. After days of scouring the woods with no trace, a flicker of hope ignites in the hearts of the men and women searching for the missing 6-year-old boy. Could this be the breakthrough they've prayed for? But then a wave of confusion sweeps over them. The tracks show one foot wearing a sneaker and the other walking barefoot. How could a barefoot 6-year-old evade 1,400 people for days? There are some terrifying secrets about America's beautiful national parks that park rangers don't want you to know about. The boy who vanished in the blink of an eye. How could a 6-year-old boy wandering the rugged wilderness disappear without a trace in just moments? The truth about Dennis Martin's disappearance is more terrifying than you think. It was Father's Day weekend, 1969, when the Martin family set out for a camping trip in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. They loved the outdoors, and this was meant to be a fun getaway with friends and their children. A picture-perfect all-American weekend, but very soon it turned into a national nightmare. At around 4:30 p.m. on June 14th, Dennis, his brother, and the other children were playing along the trails directly outside of the group's campsite. The children had planned to hide and jump out to scare the adults as they walked by. One by one, the giggling children stepped off the trail and hid in the undergrowth. Dennis's father stood nearby watching the fun unfold. He even joined in, crouching behind a thick bush along the trail leading to the campsite. Several minutes went by, and the other children grew bored of waiting and stepped out of their hiding places. Dennis's father grew concerned. He was the only kid not to emerge from the bushes. Approaching the bush, he was alarmed to discover that Dennis wasn't there. He was gone. Panic surged through him as he ran down the trail, calling out Dennis's name. The towering trees seemed to close in on him with every yell. He covered nearly 2 miles before he stopped, breathless, his heart pounding. He turned back, certain his 6-year-old son couldn't have made it this far alone. As the night began to fall, Dennis was still missing. The family contacted park rangers. Overnight, a rainstorm broke out, dumping 3 inches of rain and dropping the temperature to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The situation could not be more grim. All around them were steep slopes and deep ravines, and it was feared that Dennis could have fallen into one of them. To make matters worse, the rainstorm had washed out the trails, erasing any hope of following footprints or clues. National Guard soldiers stationed nearby were quickly contacted to join the search, as was a troop of Green Berets who happened to be training in the area. Despite an exhaustive search spanning 56 square miles and involving 1,400 dedicated personnel, Dennis had vanished without a trace, except for one chilling clue. Debate would rage long after the case grew cold, but searchers did find one set of tracks made by a small child leading to a stream. Initially dismissed as belonging to a Boy Scout assisting with the search, they showed a child with one bare foot and the other wearing a boot, the same kind of boot that Dennis Martin had been wearing. The search would prove fruitless and no trace of Dennis would be found. But questions soon arose. Would a Boy Scout really be walking around in the woods with only one shoe? More importantly, why didn't Dennis call out for help? If a man or an animal had taken him, why hadn't the adults just steps away heard a single sound? To add to the mystery, that same afternoon, tourist Harold Key and his family reported hearing a bone-jarringly loud scream coming from the woods. Looking up the trail in the direction of the scream, they reported seeing a large, shaggy-haired man carrying something over one shoulder, something that resembled a child. Authorities disregarded the lead, though, as the Keys were over 5 miles away from where Martin had disappeared. It would be impossible for an abductor to cover that distance so quickly. A human abductor, that is. For generations, locals in the region have whispered about child-snatching monsters lurking in the American wilderness, creatures that resemble men but are far from human. Some tribes describe these creatures as the Bigfoot of common knowledge. Others insist these beings are something altogether more sinister. Adding to the mystery are chilling reports of feral humans said to inhabit the Smoky Mountains. Stories of Neanderthal-like figures clad in rags or roaming naked have persisted for centuries, with sightings continuing even to this day. Dennis would not be the only person to go missing in a national park, though. National parks are a hotspot for missing people, and the Park Service refuses to release any data on missing people. Could they be hiding a sinister truth about America's favorite getaway spots? Death Valley disappearance. Death Valley is famously inhospitable, hence the name. But how in the world could a family of 4 disappear without a trace in the vast desert expanse? In July 1996, German tourist Egbert Rimkes embarked on an ambitious journey through the American Southwest. Accompanied by his girlfriend Cornelia Meyer, his 10-year-old son, and Meyer's 4-year-old son, the group was eager to experience the breathtaking yet unforgiving landscapes of Death Valley National Park. On July 22nd, they rented a minivan and ventured into the park, a place notorious for its searing summer heat. This was the middle of the desert's most brutal season, with temperatures soaring to life-threatening extremes. The family would never return from their journey. When relatives back home lost contact, they alerted the American embassy, sparking a desperate search across the vast expanse of Death Valley National Park. Months later, in October, a park ranger was flying over the remote southern reaches of the park on the lookout for illegal drug labs. Far below, he spotted a lone minivan stranded deep in Anvil Canyon, a federally protected wilderness area with no roads. When a foot patrol made it to the site, they found that the van was locked and 3 of its tires were flat and the vehicle was stuck in the sand. Working from this lead, investigators traced the route of the couple via receipts and wire transfers. They camped in Hanapaw Canyon shortly after entering the park, and a logbook the couple had signed led investigators to believe they tried to cross Mengle Pass. Mengle Pass is famous for its rough, 4-wheel drive only terrain, and the couple's minivan was no match for it. Unable to navigate the treacherous road, the family made a desperate decision to veer off of the trail and attempt a direct route across the flat desert. It was here, deep in the wilderness, that their van would eventually be found, stranded and abandoned. What perplexed investigators was a lack of any evidence after the discovery of the van. There were a few footprints and a Bud Ice beer bottle 1.7 miles east of the site, but there was no indication that it had been left by the family. While it's likely the couple had gotten lost and then succumbed to the extreme heat, the question remained, where did their bodies go? Even after an intensive 4-day search with over 200 people involved, authorities would be no closer to solving the mystery of their disappearance. Theories spread like wildfire after news of the family's disappearance broke. Some speculated they had stumbled upon drug dealers operating an illegal lab deep in the desert, but this seemed highly unlikely. The extensive search uncovered no vehicle tracks near the abandoned minivan, let alone any evidence of a drug lab. Others suggested a far more sinister explanation, that the family had fallen prey to a desert cult. This theory gained traction due to the fact that the disappearance occurred near a ranch that had once been associated with Charles Manson's cult. But some pointed at the one entity fully capable of making 4 people disappear without leaving a trace: the U.S. government. The place where the couples disappeared was near Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake. This desert site is home to testing facilities for advanced technologies developed for the U.S. Navy. Could the German couple have uncovered a secret experiment the government was undertaking? The theory gained a new resurgence when in 2009, the bones of the 2 adults were discovered just 4 miles from the border of the military installation. Additional bones were discovered and believed to belong to the children. Animal remains in national parks are nothing new, but what about remains that have no blood and show signs of surgical incisions? Something is mutilating animals inside national parks. It was the 5th young bull to die under mysterious circumstances in remote eastern Oregon during the summer of 2019. Like the others, this bull showed no signs of struggle or injury, except for the strange surgical precision of the cuts used to remove its genitals and tongue. The bull's coat was still a lively red, but something was disturbingly wrong. There was not a drop of blood inside or around the body, which appeared to be deflated, as though the life had been drained from it. The bull, like those before it, was in the prime of its life, having just reached breeding age. At 2,000 pounds, even a full-grown brown bear would have had a difficult time bringing the animal down. Yet, whoever or whatever was behind this killing, along with many others across the national forests of the American West, had done so with eerie precision and apparent ease. The only marks left behind were cuts used to remove several organs. What's stranger still was the behavior of the wilderness itself. Predators and scavengers, creatures that would normally descend on a carcass within hours, refused to touch the remains. The bodies were left untouched. It became a serious problem for American ranchers, with animal mutilations happening not just in national forests, but also in private ranches. Each of these animals could be worth as much as $6,000, making it a massive financial loss for a rancher. Police took the increasing number of mutilations very seriously, but had absolutely no leads. The only thing the police knew for sure is that it is impossible that predators or poisonous plants are doing this. Humans were also unlikely, as there were no bullet wounds on any of the animals. Adding to the mystery was the fact that there were no tracks leading to the animal's corpse. As Andy Davies, another Oregon rancher who found one of his cattle mutilated, said, "Everything you do leaves tracks in what is described as dusty country." Who or what is draining all of the blood from American cattle, removing organs before leaving, with no tracks, no signs of struggle, and no trace of its presence? How does it evade thousands of vigilant, well-armed ranchers, disappearing without a trace time and time again? If you know, the Silvies Valley Ranch has put up a $25,000 reward for anyone that can explain the mystery of cattle mutilations. Or you could ask the FBI, who mysteriously will neither confirm nor deny that they are investigating the ongoing epidemic of cattle mutilations across the western U.S. Now, there's one apex predator in America's national parks more dangerous than any other. National parks are a serial killer's playground. America's national parks offer visitors a place to get away from it all. With beautiful natural vistas and the serene solitude of the wilderness, there's no better place to get away than a camping trip in a national park. That's exactly why national parks are the favorite hunting grounds of serial killers. Cary Stayner would earn the nickname of the Yosemite National Park Killer after murdering 4 women in and around the park in 1999. Stayner's struggles with serious mental illness began at a young age. At just 7 years old, his life was upended when his younger brother Stephen was abducted by a predator and held captive for 7 harrowing years. Stephen's miraculous escape alongside another victim captured national attention. But for Cary, the trauma ran deeper. He resented his parents, believing they had neglected him while consumed by grief over Stephen's disappearance. It was clear that Cary had other psychological problems already, though. He later revealed that his dark fantasies began shockingly early. He claimed to have been imagining the abduction and murder of women as young as age 7. At his first job, Cary fantasized about ramming a truck through the front window of the office and killing everyone inside. Shortly after, he would try to end his own life, and in 1995, he was briefly admitted to a mental institution after suffering a nervous breakdown. Cary would begin killing shortly after getting a job at the Cedar Lodge Motel in El Portal, California, which sat right outside an entrance to Yosemite National Park. The first victims connected to him were 42-year-old Carol Evan Sund and the 16-year-old Argentinian exchange student, Silvinia Peloso, who had been living with her. He strangled Sund and then shot her while assaulting Peloso and then shooting her as well. The two were stuffed into the back of Sund's rental car and badly burned, with the police forced to identify the two through dental records. A week after finding Sund's car, the police got a note saying, "We had fun with this one," with a hand-drawn map to the location of a third victim, Sund's 15-year-old daughter. Following the map, police found the body of Juliana Sund. Cary was interviewed by police but not considered a suspect until months later, the body of Yosemite Institute employee Joy Ruth Armstrong was discovered. Witnesses had spotted Cary's vehicle outside of her cabin, and soon he had become the prime suspect in her murder. Police only ever linked Cary to 4 murders, backed up by the confession and evidence found during the investigation. However, it's believed that he might have been responsible for the murder of at least 4 more people who went missing in and around Yosemite National Park. He's not the only predator who turned American national parks into their hunting grounds. Gary Hilton, also known as the National Forest serial killer, would also be convicted of 4 murders and suspected of many more. The first victims tied to him were John Davis Bryant and Irene Woods Bryant, 2 retirees out on a hike in Pisgah National Forest in October 2007. Sheriffs would discover the body of Irene covered in leaves off a hiking trail. John Bryant's skull would be found a year later in Nanthala National Forest. Cheryl Hodges Dunlap's tragic encounter with Hilton unfolded in the Apalachicola National Forest. Her body was discovered off a trail by a hunter and his dogs, sparking a grim investigation. Police would later uncover that her ATM card had been used multiple times to withdraw $700 shortly after her death. Dunlap's discovery would lead to fears that a serial killer was operating inside of national parks between Georgia and Florida, fears that would soon be proven right. On New Year's Day 2008, 24-year-old Meredith Hope Emerson went for a hike along the Freeman Trail in Vogel State Park, inside of Georgia. Eyewitnesses reported seeing her and her black Labrador retriever being followed by a strange older man and his own dog. 2 days later, the authorities found her abandoned vehicle at the head of the trail with no sign of Emerson. Tipped off to the strange hiker, though, police identified Hilton as a suspect. Known as a drifter with a very bad temper and strange behavior, he had been spotted in the area and locals were already wary of him. Anonymous phone tips would lead to Hilton's arrest after the discovery of Emerson's bloody clothing, wallet, driver's license, and a student ID card for the University of Georgia. Along with these known victims, Hilton is suspected in at least 5 other murders and disappearances in or near national parks. So, the next time you decide to go hiking or camping, you better beware that the real predators may not be wolves or bears. But some park rangers will warn you that there is an invisible predator stalking the forests of America's national parks. The Glimmer Man. A disturbing phenomenon has been increasingly reported by national park visitors and rural Americans alike. The earliest known account dates back to 1969, shared by a Redditor in a national parks thread. They described a chilling encounter with an unknown entity while hiking through a park in the American Midwest. If this was just an isolated story, we wouldn't include it in this episode, but when a renowned American physicist who worked on the Strategic Defense Initiative, also known as America's Nuclear Shield, claims the phenomenon is real, it is hard not to take notice. The Redditor in question explained that while hiking, the forest around them suddenly went silent. Any experienced outdoor person knows that the forest going silent means a predator is around. So he naturally became cautious, and that's when he spotted a figure walking through the trees towards him, or rather, the shape of a figure. It was impossible to clearly make it out. The entity seemed to be partially invisible, warping the environment around it similar to the Predator in the famous movie franchise. In fact, the Redditor later admitted that when he saw the first Predator film, he nearly fell out of his chair. The resemblance was so uncanny that he became convinced the film's creator had encountered the same creature. Its cloaking effect was identical, but that's just one random Redditor. While this thread attracted dozens of eerily similar reports from across the country, it's Bruce Maccabee who brings an unparalleled level of credibility to the so-called Glimmer Man phenomenon. Maccabee was a physicist whose career with the U.S. Navy had spanned decades. Employed by the Naval Surface Warfare Center, his work focused on advanced technologies, including the use of lasers to spoof enemy sonar by creating false underwater tracks. Maccabee's expertise in laser optics also saw him contribute to some of the most pivotal defense programs in U.S. history, including Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative and the Navy's subsequent ballistic missile defense program. His resume is about as stacked as it comes, but critics will point to his interest in UFOs as a reason to attack his credibility. It's true that Bruce was involved in UFO research, but not only was he a critic who debunked many sightings, he also brought to light numerous classified government documents revealing that the Department of Defense and various intelligence agencies had shown a significant interest in UFOs. So, what does that have to do with the Glimmer Man? It wasn't Bruce who would have an encounter with the Glimmer Man phenomenon, but rather his wife, Jan. According to her, she went bow hunting and sat in her tree stand waiting for a deer to walk by. At 6:23 p.m., she sent a text to a friend saying, "Something is wrong. The woods just went to dead silence. No squirrels, no birds, no crickets. It's odd." Shortly after sending the text, she spotted something moving across her field of view, approximately 15 to 20 feet away from her in another tree. According to her, it shimmered as it moved. Thinking that maybe she had a problem with her eyesight, she rubbed her eyes, but the distortion was still there and still traveling to her right. She only became alarmed when suddenly part of it stretched out like an arm to a nearby tree, seemed to grab it and pull its body to it. She held out her phone and snapped a photo of the distortion, and shortly after it suddenly disappeared and the sounds of the forest returned. Jan didn't mention her encounter until about 11 p.m. that night when Bruce's nephew sent him an email. The same evening, shortly before Jan's encounter at a local high school football field, 40 band students witnessed a UFO appear over them in the sky. The light appeared over the tree line in the direction where Jan was hunting, and it glowed orange like a candle. The light waxed and waned until it suddenly disappeared. This is when Jan remembered her strange encounter and the photo she had taken. She used a BlackBerry cell phone with a single rear-facing lens to snap her photo. When Bruce examined the photo, he was stunned to discover that something had directly interfered with the camera's programming, but only for the picture in question. Before Jan's photo of the Glimmerman-like creature, she had taken several pictures of herself and her bow, all at standard resolution. Pictures she had taken after also had this exact same resolution. But the photo that Jan had taken of the Glimmerman phenomenon was different. In fact, it was impossible. At first glance, it seems like a simple case of sunlight causing a visual distortion in the camera. But what's impossible to explain is that this particular photo, and only this photo, had a resolution entirely different from all the others. While the BlackBerry could be adjusted to take pictures in various aspect ratios and resolutions, the resolution of the Glimmerman photo is quite simply impossible. This resolution didn't exist in any commercial cameras at the time. Creating such an image would have required changing both the software and hardware of the camera, an anomaly that defies explanation. This is something that's even impossible with a bug. Even if it were, why would it only affect the photo Jan took of the phenomenon and none of the hundreds of pictures she captured before or after the event? And then there's the UFO that was reported in the area around the time of Jan's encounter. Sometimes coincidences aren't coincidences, but if you think that's the last terrifying thing to happen at American national parks, we saved our best and most mysterious for last. The Alaskan Giants. Denali National Park is one of the most beautiful in all of the United States. Located in the heart of Alaska, it's home to some of the roughest and most breathtaking wilderness in the entire planet. And for decades, locals have reported that it is home to something big. It's not Bigfoot, it's even bigger than that. Witnesses, including military personnel training in the wilderness around the park and further north, all report the same thing: massive, human-like giants stalking the forest. These Alaskan giants have long been a part of local lore, and while no hard evidence exists, it doesn't stop witnesses from continuing to come forward to share their encounters. They're described as being around 20 to 30 feet tall, dressed in simple clothing, often carrying crude tools. One hunter described spotting one from across a valley deep in the wilderness of Denali. The hunter described hearing a loud crashing sound coming from the woods. Assuming it was a bull moose during rutting season, he did the sensible thing: he climbed a tree for safety. From his perch, he watched in awe as a massive, quote, wild man emerged from the trees across the valley. Its head was only a few feet below the crowns of the trees, towering over the undergrowth. The giant seemed utterly focused on its task, paying no attention to the distant hunter as it crossed the valley and disappeared into the forest beyond. Are Alaskan giants real? No hard proof exists aside from native oral tradition that insists they are real, and a growing body of witnesses. But two things are certain. If they did exist, Alaska, with its massive mammals like moose and elk, would easily support a creature that size. And while national parks are hotspots for missing people, Alaska has more missing people per capita than almost anywhere else in the world. Now go check out U.S. Special Forces Confession, I Recovered Crashed UFOs, or click this other video instead. What do you think of these chilling park ranger secrets? Have you had any strange experiences in national parks? Share in the comments below.